Welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Movies, brought to you by banterflix.com. And now, here's your host, Jim McLean.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed your host, Jim McLean, the editor-in-chief of the Banterflix Movie Review website. Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, We Need to Talk About Movies. If this is your first time checking out this pod, then welcome to the madness. If you've been listening to us for a while, then thank you for continuing to check in. And an even bigger thank you if you're one of our patrons, because you help make it all happen. So, this week we have a comic book special. I'm going to be joined in this recording by Aaron Flanagan from the Comic Book Guys here in Belfast. The pod is just over an hour in length. We're going to be talking about WandaVision. Not really in any spoilerific detail, because this was recorded a few weeks ago just after the first two episodes had aired on Disney's streaming service. But this is more of a 101. Everything you need to know about the characters of Wanda and Vision, their comic book origins, some of the writers and artists who've worked on some of the key storylines over the years that they featured in Marvel Comics, and just generally a bit of a chat with Aaron about some of the key issues you might want to look out for if you've been inspired by watching WandaVision to seek out some reading material based on the characters. It's a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun chatting to Aaron. And so that's pretty much it. And before we get into our chat, let's play a clip of WandaVision.
Heavenly shades of night are calling. It's twilight time.
Wanda and Vision, aren't we a five-pair?
This is our home now. I want us to fit in.
Oh, this is gonna be a gas!
Where did you two move from? How long have you been married, and why don't you have children yet?
Our story.
I think what my wife means to say is that we moved from...
Moved from where? Married when? Damn it, why?
Oh, Arthur, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Deep in the dark, darkness will thrill.
This is really happening.
Like days of old, lighting the spark of love that fills me.
Am I dead?
No. Why would you think that?
Because you are.
So that's a clip of WandaVision, and I'm joined now by Aaron Flanagan from the Comic Book Guys. Hello to you,
Hi,
Aaron.
everyone. Hello.
I don't know if it's too late, Aaron, but we'll say it anyway. Happy New Year to you.
It's never too late. Happy New Year.
Well, come on. If it's like November time and you turn around to someone and say, Happy New Year, you're like,
People don't know,
nothing.
Jim. For all people know, we recorded this like 6 months ago.
This is true. It could still be 2020. And the uprising by the Trump resistance hasn't taken place yet, you know. And it'll be like seen as a better time. It's like, oh, remember COVID? Remember all that? And they're sitting there acting like a pair of dicks, going on about, oh, what a great Happy New Year it is. No, we will say this at the outset, you know, we are recording this. WandaVision has just launched. I think it's not just here in the UK. I think it's on all Disney Plus territories. We have currently got two episodes, sorry, I should say. 2 episodes of WandaVision. And that's kind of gives you an idea that this is not really a WandaVision spoiler cast or anything like that. We'll be sharing our thoughts initially on what we've seen so far, but it's more about getting to know the two central characters, Wanda and Vision, and talking a little bit more about their comic book mythology, their back catalogue, and of course, Aaron's here to sell stuff, so any of the comics that he might recommend that conveniently he has in store, although right now as we record, people can't go in the store, they can go online or phone up Aaron and go, hey, heard that podcast you did, get me those podcasts, and can you get any discount for listening to the podcast? And your answer will be, no, you can't get any discount, but you can get the issues sent out to you. But anyway, that was a little bit rambly. So yes, it's not really, this isn't really kind of a WandaVision spoiler cast. We can talk about what we've seen in the first 2 episodes. You and I have both seen it.
Yep.
You're really enthusiastic about it. So generally kind of your thoughts on what you've seen so far?
Honestly, no word of a lie. A lot of the stuff, obviously, the way the world is, a lot of the films and all have been put on the back burner and TV shows, and I didn't put much thought into to even thinking WandaVision was going to be any good. I liked the characters growing up reading them. They were always characters that were never central in any of the stories I read, but always played a part. So they're not characters that ever were like, oh, it's the Hulk or it's Doctor Strange or it's a big character. They were always bit part players in a lot of the stories that I was reading until I read House of M, but we'll talk about that later. But whenever they said they were doing WandaVision, I sort of thought, I don't really get the premise of this show. Don't understand where in the timeline it's set. Don't understand a lot of stuff about it. And when I seen the trailer, I was even more confused. So I said to Kira had sort of went off the boil a wee bit watching a lot of the superhero stuff. She became a bit fatigued with it all because there was such a plethora of stuff coming out at the time.
Hey, Aaron, she should read an article I wrote about 3 years about comic book fatigue. You know, if she's maybe
where
only
can you get that?
up. You can get that at banterflix.com. We don't even charge you. That's where we're going downhill. We don't charge you for comedy gold like what you're watching or listening to right now, people.
But that happened to her, so she sort of went off the boil with some of them. I should still watch them because obviously, I was watching them, so she'd watch them with me. But this one, when we watched the trailer, there was something about it that she just said, God, that looks class. Actually, it looks like I think she compared it to Bewitched. I think it was Bewitched. I know there's been comparisons drawn with, is it I Dreamed of Jeannie or one of those old-timer shows? But she just said, because she watches things like The Monsters, the original Monster show, she loves that old-timey show. And when she's seen the trailer, she laughed her head off at one wee bit. And I sort of thought, fuck it, I'll have to give this a go with her to see if she likes it. The two of us sat down on I can't remember, whenever it was Thursday or Friday night, whenever it aired. And I was actually planning to do a bit of work while we were watching it, just as a do it in the background. Fuck, I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was class. It was absolutely brilliant because I still don't fully know what's happened. I don't really know what's going on. It still leave you a few questions in it. But as a comic book nerd and as a comic book fan and lover, it felt just like the pages out of a comic book. A lot of the stuff that was happening. It's very sitcom-esque. And, I think even it felt, I don't know if it was really an audience there, but it felt like there was canned laughter, like an episode of Friends or one of those things. And it had a weird feeling about it that Marvel have never done. Like, I've never seen anything like it. And so when we watched the first couple of episodes, definitely taken aback with how good it was. But for all of the intrigue and the questions that you're constantly sitting wondering what's going on here, and for all the wee comic book nods that were being thrown about and you picking out the odd one here and there, the thing that I think was best about it was the storyline. There's an undercurrent constantly running throughout it, and it feels a bit ominous. It always feels like there's something bad about to happen or something's not quite right. And it feels like, it doesn't have the horror aspect, but it feels like a Blumhouse film or something because it's got those undercurrents a bit like Happy Death Day or whatever that was, where you're sort of thinking, what's going on here? There has to be, there's something dodgy or something nefarious, and there's some overarching plan. And when you start to pick out the wee nods that are in it, and the wee Marvel nods that are in it, you start to build up the picture that there definitely is something quite sinister happening here. And that's why, for all the jokes and the laughter, like in the first or second episode, it's not a spoiler. There's a magical scene where they're being magicians in front of the whole town, and I laughed my head off. It was absolute comedy gold, actually. And Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, isn't it? Yeah. The two of them together were class at it. The back and forth is brilliant. So for the comedy that's in it and for all that stuff, the thing that I think carries the show and is going to be unreal about the show is the constant intrigue, is wondering what's going on here. What is this bigger picture? So, because unlike Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all those other TV shows Marvel have done, it does leave you wanting more all the time. So I loved it.
Yeah, I was intrigued, Matt. There's things that I think part of me, because I've talked to a few of the Banterflix comrades, and I know before we were recording, we were talking over WhatsApp about stuff like a lot of people are, particularly during the current lockdown that we're in, once again, are binge viewing a lot of stuff and just want to get through everything as soon as possible. And I think a series like this might actually be slightly better binge watched as an overall experience, but I also think it's quite good in that sense that, like, particularly we've just finished episode 2. I'm sure we'll come back to it. We've had the issue with the beekeeper who's coming up from the sewers, and there's stuff on the back of his outfit, his uniform, that I know a lot of people are picking apart, and you're kind of going, oh, okay, I want more. But because I'm trying not to binge watch anything. Like Cobra Kai season 3, I'm only allowing myself 2 episodes a week just to stretch it out, because if you binge it all, unless you want to go back and watch it all again, which some people do, I'm not a massive fan of, unless it's something absolutely amazing. It's then gone, it's done, and then God knows when you're going to get the next series of it. But like you, I love Elizabeth Olsen anyway. I think she's a great actress. I think I loved her in stuff like, I can't remember the name of the film, Martha May Marlene. I can't remember the name. It's often, without kind of frantically going on to IMDb, about a woman who's kind of, I know we're on video.
That in our first episode.
I know we're on video, so I can't actually cheat. I can't like just go up and go, yes, I'll just get the name of this right now. But no, I would recommend it. I'll find it on the IMDb afterwards and throw it up in the link. It's where she plays someone who's coming out of being in a cult and trying to adapt to real life. And the question is, has the cult really let her go? And there's real Charles Manson vibes. But I love her as a performer. I also love Paul Bettany. I think Paul Bettany is such an underrated performer. And at least something you said earlier on about characters that have been bit part figures for so long. And I don't know, because you were saying there that Kira, your partner, has kind of been suffering from comic book fatigue, like over not just this lockdown or the second one or the first one. Did you go back and revisit any of the MCU stuff, or have you kind of, because I've been holding off.
Yeah.
And I have to say, from watching WandaVision, I'm kind of intrigued, or kind of tempted now to maybe say, right, I'm going to take the plunge. I'm actually going to go now, and I'm going to go back, and I don't know whether I'm going to do it in chronological order. Will I do it in kind of the order they were released? Will I even bother with the first Hulk movie? All that stuff. But at least, though, for this, you're actually getting to see what a good performer Paul Bettany is, because Vision, he's been a bit of a boring bastard, let's be honest. I think that's the technical
He's a fucking robot. What do you expect?
He's a robot, but he's a boring, but I mean, I quite liked him as, this is where my comic book criteria will basically completely let down as, is it not Jinx? No, not Jinx. That's from Space Camp in the 80s. What's the name of the robot he was before Vision? When he was Tony Stark's assistant. Jarvis. There we go. I quite liked him. I mean, he was great as the voice, and then we've seen him in Vision, and then he kind of went from being real boring to, like, in the last Avengers, Endgame, and Infinity. Infinity.
You know what changed in that, though, Jim?
What's that?
Do you want me to tell you the answer?
You've asked the question and I haven't answered, so you're going to have to answer. Otherwise, our listeners will just sit here in silence.
Wanda.
Okay, Wanda brought out the real Vision.
I think so. Wanda is his whole reason for existence.
Okay, I would agree with you, and I think having him so front and center now, not being a bit part player, I think shows again, as I come back to that point, what a good actor Paul Bettany is, and kind of how interesting, I suppose, if you take that approach with a character like Vision. Like, there's stuff in the second episode that says, not really spoilers, there's stuff with chewing gum.
Oh.
And kind of the effect it has. And yeah, I find myself properly laughing. The only thing I will say in regards to laughing, and you mentioned earlier on, Christ, the canned laughter is annoying. I think it's purposely meant to almost annoy you.
Yeah.
I get that sense that it's like, it's taking the piss out of kind of how terrible the canned laughter tracks is, because I've been rewatching over lockdown, like Parks and Recreation. I've been rewatching The Office USA.
Unbelievable.
Have canned laughter, and then when you go and watch stuff like even Friends, or even, oh god, the worst recent example is Big Bang Theory. I don't know, have you ever seen on YouTube the video?
Do they have an actual audience?
Well, they still have canned laughter. Because have you ever seen on YouTube, I'll put this up as well, on the Big Bang Theory, when they remove the canned laughter track?
Is it like the football without the crowd sex?
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. But you're just like, oof. Or it's a bit like, I think, isn't it Friends, where they remove the laugh track and Ross just comes across as a psychopath? But particularly in the Unagi episode. But anyway, that's kind of my thing so far. I think I'm interested to see where it goes, because there's 9 episodes in total. It's not just going to stick. We've already see it again, spoiler, non-spoiler. It's moving away from the I Dream of Jeannie kind of mantra, black and white, and it's going to move forward now. It's going to be colored. So there's a couple of things I could spoiler, but I'll not. but I don't know where it's going to go to next. And you can see the nods to all those classic sitcoms. So I'm intrigued with it. But I want to ask you this question. So this is technically kicking off Marvel Phase 4.
Yes.
I think that's the phase that we're in. The phases confuse me. Would have been Black Widow kicking it off, which I felt was a bit weird because that was something that was set as a precursor to everything. Yeah. And we've just seen that character die. Spoiler, listeners, but come on, if you haven't seen Endgame, where have you been? We've seen that character die. We've seen that character die. Then she was kind of leading it. But then we had all the stuff with COVID. That's been pushed back. Apparently, according to Kevin Feige, it doesn't change their plans too much. But I've got a list here. So this is WandaVision is kicking off this new brand, stuff that's all done properly by Marvel Studios. So we're going to have, later this year, we're going to have The Falcon and Winter Soldier. Good. Loki.
Brilliant.
Marvel's What If, which I'm intrigued
about.
Mrs. Marvel. Hawkeye. Moonlight. She-Hulk.
Moon Knight. Get me on the podcast for that all day long.
Okay. Moonlight. She-Hulk. Secret Invasion. Ironheart. And Armor Wars. So that's a lot of stuff. Right. And this is a question I was going to ask. And I know we're not specifically talking just about the MCU right now. But the fact is, I suppose it's nothing new for comic book fans and comic book readers. The fact that there's so much kind of further reading or further viewing in this case you've got to do. Are you not a little bit daunted by that? The fact that, according to Kevin Feige, like, apparently WandaVision leads directly into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse.
Yeah.
And there is something I'm going to come to later on that I don't know, because I'm not as well versed on Marvel stuff and anything beyond really Spider-Man, which I read when I was younger.
Yeah.
There is some things I want to come back to. But the fact now, if you're a fan of the MCU, it's gone from just you've maybe going to watch 3 films a year to now you're going to have to watch 3 films and a lot of TV content as well. Yeah. Do you think there could be a thought of maybe overkill or stretching it out too much, or do you think this is a good thing?
No, on this one, actually, I know I was saying that Keir has fatigue from the films. I think they've been very clever because those announcements, even when you read down through that list, Jim, you're somebody who reads comics. You obviously read comics on a weekly basis, so you do. Yeah, I know you play it down that you don't have a great insight. You do know your stuff. Maybe more DC than Marvel, but when you go down,
well, hang on, Aaron. Let's be honest. If it's just Batman, it's like anything. It's like you're a drug peddler with me. Anything comes in new with Batman. It's like, yeah, Jim, we've got this new, really interesting one shot. It's Batman, but it's like written completely. It's in black and white, and it's written in Japanese. It's really niche. It's really cool. Do you want it? It's like, yeah, fuck it. How many covers are there? Variants cover. Fuck it. Put me down for all of them. Yeah, go for it. So yeah, you're a drug peddler for me for Batman, but
that's okay. I'll take that. I've been called much worse. But no, for what I'm saying is, when you're going down through that list, if you're being honest, you would know or heard of most of those characters, but there's a few that you're completely unfamiliar with. And I think, do you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to do a TV version and films for someone of exactly what they did with Guardians, picking unknown characters or characters that are slightly, maybe not B-list characters, that's not the right term, but characters who aren't the forerunners. They are not the big I-ams. They're the characters who they have. Some of them, some of those characters are only new. Ironheart, she's a relatively new character to Marvel. She's only been around for 2 years. Secret Invasion it was a mini series. It was a short run. What else did you say? Loki. We've seen Loki in the films. Giving him the front and center is pushing a smaller character to the fore. I think it's class what they're doing, because what they're doing is they don't need to have an agenda for these, because people's preconceptions won't be as, I know exactly what Captain America is, what he does, who he is. With these characters, they don't need to do that. Yes, the comic book fans will have judgment based on that, but to the wider audience and to the mass market, they can have a bit more freedom and flexibility with how they create this next phase. And I think it's going to be brilliant. Yeah, picking Moon Knight, Jim. I never in my wildest dreams thought they would ever make a Moon Knight TV show or film. One of the most underrated characters that nobody knows about, yet he's every bit as good as Batman. He's every bit as good as any character that you can.
He's not as good as Batman, Aaron. Not as good as Batman.
He's the Marvel equivalent of Batman.
Okay, but he's not as good as Batman. I'll be honest, I know absolutely squelch about him, but he's not as good as Batman. But
all I'm saying is, I think this next phase, starting with WandaVision, has humongous potential, more so than any other phase in the last 10, 15 years Marvel have been doing, because it's so different.
I'm going to come back to I'm going to come back to on that and ask you why you think that. And I think you've already answered that already. But the fact is, my point more so is the fact that in the past, we've seen stuff that have been produced by Marvel. We think of like Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was kind of, it was Marvel Television. It was made by different companies. There was AMC. There was the Netflix stuff, which I fucking adored. I absolutely loved Daredevil. I can't bring myself to watch the last episode of Daredevil season 3 because then it's gone. I know, okay, we can talk. This is also something I want to come back to because we've got other rumors and I want to see kind of if that kind of leads into anything of my theories. But those were shows that were loosely connected. You could watch Daredevil, you could watch Jessica Jones. If you really wanted to, you could watch Iron Fist, but why would you bother? If you, Luke Cage was a class character I liked anytime I read any of the comics. I never really got the series, although I would like to see a Luke Cage and Iron Fist series, but that's just me. I'm surprised they didn't go down there, but then, okay, well, why am I surprised? Because we knew it was all getting cancelled because of Disney Plus and all that stuff. But those were loosely connected. If you wanted to watch them, you could. It didn't change kind of your understanding of something. So what I'm saying is, for someone who maybe loves Marvel, loved Doctor Strange, and now you're being told, right, well, Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse, directed by Sam Raimi. It's going to be out later this year, I think, possibly next year. Really exciting. Sam Raimi in the MCU. But if you really want to get the full 100% experience about this, you need to have watched WandaVision. Is what basically Kevin Feige's telling you. Do you not think that's kind of stretching the MCU? I know you're kind of saying it's enriching it and filling it out, but do you not think it's also in danger of stretching it too far? So people like Kira, who are comic book fans, if Kira, I don't know how hardcore comic book fan Kira is, but if even someone like that find herself going, I'm a bit fatigued, the average cinema goer, that's my only kind of thing.
But I think as the average cinema goer who wants to go and see a big budget Marvel film, who has no interest in reading around the subject, just wants to go and have an enjoyment of a popcorn type film, I don't think they'll necessarily need that full experience, that immersive experience of knowing all the ins and outs of what's happened in WandaVision. And if Doctor Strange, now again, this isn't a spoiler because nobody knows if it's going to happen or not, so this is just talk and gossip. If Doctor Strange makes an appearance in this, which the talk is that he might make an appearance in WandaVision, does that mean that we need to have watched, or you need to have watched this if you go and see Doctor Strange, the film? I'm not so sure. Because, there's lots of stuff that there are wee nods thrown in the fan service sometimes. There's stuff that's thrown in that if you don't know it, you never, it won't affect your viewing of something. So I think it can only be, as you said, an enrichment experience. I don't think it's going to be detrimental to the average cinema going. The only people it could be possibly detrimental to are the real diehards, because they're the ones who want to watch everything. And if you have to watch everything to understand everything else, it might become a bit fatiguing again. As I say, that, Kira reads comics. She reads comics every single week. She reads Spider-Man religiously. So she's a massive fan of Marvel. So the fact that, she can get fatigued watching stuff, to me, it says that there must be a lot of people out there suffering. And I've even said to you on one of the shows, Jim, there's certain times watching so many of the films that I felt like, my God, it's the only thing that was out in the cinema for a while. Every single time, every month there was a new comic book film. And it's not, I never got fatigued with it. I got more thinking, will other people get fatigued with it? And that was my worry, because if people get fatigued with something, generally then it goes off the boil, and you sort of think, does that have ramifications for people's love of comic books, and what does that mean? There's lots of questions you start asking yourself to become fatigued with films. But no, I don't think with the TV stuff it's going to be detrimental at all. It is a strange one though, because as you say, they've done Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they've done Daredevil, they've done all those shows, but this feels different. This feels so different, and I can't put the finger on why.
Well, I think it's because it's pretty much, it's in-house. It's something that they seem to have much more control of and are going to clearly do a bigger job of upselling. Like I think in Daredevil, again, come back to me, and I loved it. I really loved the first season. And the first season is probably the one that is probably closest into the MCU because it kind of talks about the aftermath of the finale of Avengers, and they kind of talk about it as the event. And I kind of like that. It was a nice kind of very loose kind of.
I think that's what's going to happen though, Jim, with this.
I don't know. I guess we've never been told before that that you need to watch Daredevil to understand, this and understand that movie or that movie. And I say understand, it's probably overselling it quite a bit, but that idea of you need to watch WandaVision to kind of set the mood for Doctor Strange into the multiverse. And I'm intrigued by that. I mean, I love the first Doctor Strange movie. I'm surprised it's taken them so long to make a sequel. Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige clearly know what they're doing. I think because this is one thing I don't know. Because I mean, you've talked there about tidbits and stuff. Like, what have you picked up so far from WandaVision that you would say to maybe someone like me, Jim? Who should I be paying close attention to? What should I be paying close attention to? I don't know if you want to go as far as to say your theories, because we're not even on episode 3 yet, and by the time this podcast is released, we're probably at episode 4, and everything you kind of say could be debunked by then. True.
I mean, I'll not go into theories too much in terms of what I think, because I talk a lot of shit, most of the time.
That's true.
I'm not. What I'll say is things that I noticed that interested me, because there's certain wee tidbits. Now, I'll be brutally honest. Like, there's probably a lot of the wee hidden secrets or Marvel secrets that I didn't even pick up on notice, because there is the very odd one that even just reading around it, there's stuff that I've never noticed, like simple things that in the opening credits there's a little skull, it's a helmet, and it's of a character called Grim Reaper. It's supposed to be the Grim Reaper's, one of the characters is called Grim Reaper. And in the comics, Grim Reaper is pretty much, for, I would say, 80% of the Vision's comic stories and arcs, Grim Reaper's always the villain. We always have to have a big villain. Grim Reaper is always Vision's, and it made sense. And then the thing was, I read that because I love looking up Easter eggs. So a few of the Easter eggs, when I spotted them, I thought, I wonder if anybody else noticed that, or I wonder, is that something? So I did a bit of looking up, and that was the one. When I read it, I sort of thought, how did I miss that? Because Grim Reaper is an obvious thing. He should appear in this series at some point. And then that led me down a path thinking, well, what comics have I read that Grim Reaper's been in that would be similar to this? And again, we'll probably touch on it, but one of the best stories that I've read of the Vision as a sole character was from it was 2015 or 2016, and it was obviously you've met Jodie Belair, Jim, and she coloured a series called The Vision, and it was just about the Vision living in the suburbs. And the whole story, I'm gonna start to put together, the whole story is, so it's about Vision living out in the suburbs, and he's trying to live a normal life, and he has kids, he has a family, and the Grim Reaper comes to him, and in the end they have to attack and kill the Grim Reaper. And the whole point of that 6 or 12 part series is the Vision trying to lead a normal life. And I sort of thought, fuck, that sounds exactly like what's going on at the minute in WandaVision. It's the Vision trying to live a normal life in the suburbs. And then I thought, is that where they're copying this sort of storyline from? So if they're doing that, and there's a wee nod here to Grim Reaper, is that the route they're going? And then you start to lead down another path of thinking, well, all the nods in that were things like on the Vision lived in 616. That was his house number in the comic. 616, for all the comic book nerds, there is the essentially where all the heroes, the Earth the heroes are from. It's called 616. So I went stupidly and rewinded to see, fuck, is he living at 616 here in this show? But he's not. So it's that's what I'm saying. So there's things like that you.
How long was that anecdote there? How long was that anecdote that you went?
What I'm saying is, there's lots of stuff as a comic book nerd that you read into thinking, I've figured this out.
But are you in danger of being a comic book nerd, of reading too much into every single thing?
Yes, big time. That's why sometimes I would, I try to look at the bigger picture a lot of the time, but because I feel there's there's stuff that Marvel are so clever with, a bit like when I was watching The Mandalorian as well for the Star Wars stuff. They're so clever in trying to give fan service to the diehards. You're always looking out for it. It's like I can't help but look out for certain things. So, but as I say, we'll talk about those wee nods. But when you're asking me there, what some of the things that I've spotted that would be useful to keep an eye out for. That was one of them. The wee Grim Reaper helmet for sure. One of the massive things, and it's not a spoiler, that people like. I'm saying this again. This could be debunked in the next episode or two. I don't think it will be. But as Jim said, there's a beekeeper coming out of the sewers, and there's a big logo on the back. And now, for anybody who knows do you know who the logo is, Jim?
Sword.
So Sword in the comics play a massive, massive role. They're essentially like Shield, so they're a counterpart to Shield. So Shield look after stuff on Earth, in terms of trying to keep the planet safe, whereas the Sword look after the stuff that's happening outside of Earth. They look at after the galaxy stuff. It's something like sentient world or something. I can't remember exactly what it means. Forgive me, I'm not that much of a comic book nerd clearly, but they look after stuff, and that's very important because. In this, you get to see a character called Monica Rambeau, and we will have seen Rambeau in. Do you know what it is, Jim?
Nope.
Captain Marvel. So, and she obviously is all to do with the outside of the planet stuff. So, so the fact that Sword have appeared in this, or the logos appeared anyway, something that's going to play a massive pivotal role in this whole series for sure. The fact that an Agents of Shield TV show. It seems like they're going to try to play down a fucking Agents of Sword role or something, in that sense, is that the role they're going down with this? But there's something massive that could happen with that. And the one other one, I mean, there's loads, but I'm not going to go through them all because I don't want to spoil all of them. There's, in each episode so far, they've done an advert.
Yeah.
You know what they are anyway, Jim, but for people who haven't seen it, there's an advert that happens halfway through each episode, and it's supposed to be a sort of a fun, playful way of breaking up an episode as if it was an old-timey episode. The first one, you just think it's a toaster. It's an advert for a toaster made by Stark Industries, but everything's not what it seems with a toaster. Again, do you think it's a spoiler to talk about it, Jim? Or?
Well, potentially yes, but I mean, as I say, this episode isn't going out for a couple of weeks. So as I say, by the time this episode goes out to just on public, because it'll be available for a couple of days beforehand to our patrons, and then it'll be available on general release. Will probably be in episode 4.
Okay.
So I don't know if you say, because I mean I've got it noted down here. We've the Stark Industries toaster, and we have the Strucker watch. And Strucker, I remember from Civil War, from Avengers, Ultron.
Yep. And
that's kind of so. Again, without going into theories too much, but I mean, do you think this is going on for Wanda, or do you think this is going on for Vision?
If I was a betting man, I would put £100 on it right now with you, Jim. It's completely 100% all happening in Wanda's head.
Okay, it's kind of my theory too. I mean, my kind of thoughts, and you can tell me if I'm way off or not. Well, we've had the kind of stuff, we've had the radio broadcast coming through saying what's happened to you.
Yep.
Who did this to you, Rhonda? We've had the song "Help Me, Rhonda," help me, Rhonda, coming through. But I don't know. I don't think I ever read House of M. I don't think I did, but I know people who have, and it's not just you. And it's kind of, I'm wondering, is people are talking about WandaVision setting up Doctor Strange into the multiverse and moving kind of beyond that, but I'm wondering, because we were kind of talking earlier on about, well, you mentioned it about Spider-Man 3's, I think, going to be out later this year.
Yep.
Spider-Man 3, you've got the fact we're going to have Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Charlie Cox, apparently rumored we're going to have Alfred Molina's Doc Ock coming back. So they're clearly going for like a Into the Spider-Verse kind of vibe. So I'm wondering, is what's happening here, and maybe you can just say, if you want to just keep it to yes or no, is something that's happening. It's just this down sort of where we maybe know too much through internet casts and stuff. Is what's going on in WandaVision going to set the stone for that down the line? And even, I suppose, in a way, the fact that Marvel have now finally got their hands on, or Marvel Studios have got their hands on the X-Men properties, that this will be used as a way to kind of bring that all in the similar way that they're going to do with the Flash movie with DC, and they're now going to bring Michael Keaton back. They're going to have Ben Affleck back. We're going to have Robert Pattinson's Batman, maybe as more standalone. It seems to be that this is the way that all this kind of DC and Marvel seem to be going for now. Right, we've pushed the kind of straightforward stuff. Yeah. We're now going to go for the multiverse stuff, which I'll be honest, for me, when I was reading, I know when I was reading kind of stuff like Spider-Man, okay, I accepted the Clone Saga. It went on far too long. It was bonkers. It was stupid. It didn't make sense. But when Marvel and stuff, particularly even DC, when it really got into the multiverse stuff, I'll be honest, coming back to what we were saying earlier on, it did lose me a little.
Sometimes a lot of the multiverse stuff can be not challenging. It can be slightly. It can be very confusing, actually, if I'm being honest. But there are a lot of the analogy I use for the multiverse stuff, and it's maybe not a good one. Like when I was a kid, and what am I talking about when I was a kid? Fucking still today, I love watching films and TV shows.
I thought you were going to say you were still a kid. Like you're not a kid, Aaron.
I still love watching stuff, and I still actively look out for something. And you'll know because me and you talk about this on the side, Jim. Things like Expendables. See when you put a massive team of things together that you never thought that would be together. It's the thing that I look forward to most. A bit like the Avengers, when you see all of those people coming together in all those films, and you get to see them pulling things from everywhere. It's the best thing since sliced bread.
So you're that person who, at the end of Avengers Endgame, waited so many movies, so many years just for Captain America to go, Avengers, assemble! And you literally creamed your nags at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that's right.
That was it. But those are the moments that you wait for. But that's why when it comes to the multiverse stuff, like you rounded off there. Tobey Maguire back, fucking Alfred Molina back, having them all mixed in with all the current stuff. Fuck, it sounds unreal.
Will Bruce Campbell be back in all his different guises from all 3 different Spider-Man movies? That's what I want.
Yeah, exactly right. But that's it. You can do that with multiverse stuff. You can do anything, and I think that's what I like about it, because you can go so fucking bonkers with it, because you can make it so completely out there. And do you know what your excuse is, or what your reasoning is behind it? It's to do with the multiverse. And that's all you need to say. So the multiverse can be confusing, but it can also be the biggest get out of jail free card when you're explaining something to somebody, when you just go, no, that's happening in the multiverse. Done. And that's explained off. So for this, I think that the multiverse route that they're going with the Vision and Wanda stuff ties very much. I don't want to, as you say, I could say some stuff that happens in comics that could have.
But that's what I'm at. This is coming back to what I asked you. Do you think, without going into specific, is WandaVision laying the foundations for this?
If you want my honest answer, 100% yes.
Is that your final answer? Just to go full Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, is that your final answer?
Can I ask it? Can I phone a friend?
You want to phone a friend?
No, but see, Brian, if there's a story, I think you mentioned there, one of the storylines in comics that has had massive acclaim, it was only a short run, but had lasting effects on the Marvel Universe, was the House of M.
Well, we're going to come back to that. We'll talk about that.
The only thing I will say now about it is that's why I think that this is laying the framework for all this other stuff.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that kind of nicely leads us into, as I say, this isn't really cool. How long have we spent talking about WandaVision? This podcast wasn't meant to be about that. It's more about looking at the comic book origins of the 2 central characters. We have Wanda and we have Vision. 2 characters, as Aaron said earlier on, have mostly been sidelined in the MCU's big screen outings so far. Now they're getting front and center treatment as the start of Phase 4, the start of Marvel Studios small screen stuff. So this might be the opportunity. Aaron, you run a shop, people want to buy stuff. This was the opportunity with people who now maybe want to research and read more about these 2 characters. But you've mentioned House of M.
Yep.
But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about the origins. I don't know whether you want to do them collectively or you want to do them one after another. A little bit about their comic book origins and how they might kind of differ. Maybe they don't, from what we've seen on the big screen. Their origins, or what their origins, how they've been slightly different from what we've seen in the MCU to what we've seen, people would have read in the comics.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, the characters both, they came actually, they were around the same sort of time. Just to give people a wee bit of background, the Vision, I'll start with the Vision. So he first appeared in 1968, but he appeared in an issue, and it's an issue we actually have in the shop. It's Avengers 57. one of the most iconic covers in comic book history.
Who did it?
Come on, John. Have you not done your research?
No,
John
I haven't.
Buscema. So John Buscema is...
Why would I do my research when I've got the comic book guru with me? I'm just asking the questions.
So in the 70s, 60s, 70s, there was about 3 mainstay artists who they used for everything. Obviously, you have King Kirby. King Kirby did most of the stuff. You had John Buscema, who then had 2 kids, Sal Buscema and another one of the Buscemas. But they were the go-to people. See, when it came to drawing a big character or drawing a new storyline, you went to them. You got them to do their stuff. And Buscema is known predominantly for Marvel for doing things like Spider-Man at the time. But the cover anyway, that Avengers 57, it's the Vision standing over the top of like a mountainside. Very, very, there's not much to the cover, but it's just an imposing image of the Vision. It was the first time people were introduced to him. And at the time, Roy Thomas was writing the Avengers run. And Roy Thomas, again, was probably the foremost writer of Avengers for a long period. A few people took over from him, but it's pretty much the most definitive run of Avengers. Stan Lee was editing that run at the time, so he was helping sort of write the overarching storyline, while Roy Thomas was actually writing the stories himself. And in that, Roy Thomas was a massive, massive fan of the old age of comics, the golden age of comics. Mm-hmm. So it was a time the Avengers had sort of went off the boil and they were trying to introduce new characters into it. So he came up with the character, the Vision. Now, it's not even what he wanted to call him. It was Stan Lee who came up with the name. And it was done it was a tongue-in-cheek part of the issue where I think it was the Wasp said, "I seen a vision." And that was how he got the name Vision. But in that issue, that was when he first came to be. And I think people predominantly know how the Vision came about. He was Jarvis technology, as you said earlier, Jim. Imbued by, it was created by Ultron. He was created by a villain, and he was supposed to be created to infiltrate the Avengers to create world domination for Ultron. But it was during that time that when he met up with the Avengers, he had a change of heart. I don't know how he had a change of heart, though he doesn't have one, but he had a change of tact, and he ended up joining the Avengers. Now, that was his sort of early origin, and at the end of the day, he's an android who was imbued with, I think it was a Wonder Man. They tried to imbue him in the Wonder Man, but they imbued him with the Jarvis technology. So he was a character that people were already familiar with, but they give him a body and a life formula. But the cool thing was giving him the relationship, because for the first few years of the Vision, he was a complete bit part character. Apart from that first story arc with Ultron, after that, he was sort of discarded a wee bit because he was underused and underutilized. So they had to try to create a path for him that could sort of give him a wee bit of the screen time, if you will. So they ended up giving him a love relationship with Wanda. And at the time, she was created a wee bit before the Vision. She was
64, I think she
64. She was 64. So, and that's an issue that we have again in the shop. And I'll talk about the collectability of some of the issues because of WandaVision shortly. But if it's X-Men 4, so very, very, very early days X-Men. Right. And not a lot of people would know. She originally was brought into the comics as Magneto's daughter. So she was part of the Brotherhood of Evil with Quicksilver, who I think in the film she is considered his twin, isn't she? I can't remember how the films do it, but in the comics she's Quicksilver's twin. And she started off as a villain, but she wasn't really a villain. She never wanted to be a villain. It was just because she was Magneto's daughter, she felt obliged to join this Brotherhood of Evil and wreak havoc. But it was quick. Soon after that, you could see she wasn't cut out for being evil.
Her heart wasn't in it. She wasn't really a bad one.
She wasn't a bad one, exactly. She wasn't a bad egg. So when she joined the Avengers, her and Vision were two of the only characters in that run that weren't in other titles. Now, she started off in an X-Men title, but she's not really an X-Man. She's not really... Her first appearance was in an X-Men story. She's a mutant, but not a mutant. She's a witch, so she doesn't really fit that mold. So they then put her into the Avengers, and once they put her into that team, her and Vision were the only two characters that weren't appearing in anything else. So they needed to give them the storyline. And what they decided to do was try to give Vision a heart by having the two of them fall in love. And it was you might have done your research in 1975, I think it was 1975. It was around that time when the two of them got married in one of the annuals. Now, annuals, you reading comics, annuals are always like one-shot stories that are there as, I don't mean to say it, but they're like filler issues a lot of the time, just to give you sometimes a wee bit of... Well,
sometimes filler, sometimes setting the tone for stuff that's going to come.
Yeah, exactly right. So when they did that in the Giant Size Annual, it was a big shock, actually, but what it did was it humanized Vision, because for the longest time, and he's an android, so they wanted to create something that was a bit bringing him more as a human, but also bringing Wanda in from being such a, because her power is one of the most extreme powers out of any of the superheroes. I mean, she can alter reality. She can do anything. So by reining her in a wee bit and by giving Vision a heart, it made them actually the perfect couple. And it was actually it was a lovely storyline that went down with them. But I think that when they humanized the Vision, that's really when his character became probably the best that it was, because he went through a transitional period in becoming a B-list or a C-list character into becoming quite important in the Avengers for a lot of the stories that happened, you know. So I think it was one of the smartest moves that they did. And for their backgrounds anyway, I would say that the two of them being sole characters in the Avengers really did actually help them become, you know, mainstay characters, because if they had been flitting about other titles, they might have just disappeared at some point, but they were always consistently there, which was good. So but that's a wee bit of the background into when they first appeared. But I think, as I say, most people know now that because of the films, they do give a decent background and origin story into these characters, and they weren't far off really how they were brought about in the comics, you know.
Well, I suppose like the only real thing, you know, we've alluded to this earlier on, particularly I suppose with a character like Wanda, is the fact that when we look back to Age of Ultron, X-Men and all that stuff, that was owned by Fox. So, of course, they couldn't mention Magneto in any way. So we had that weird kind of situation where we had two Quicksilvers.
Yep.
We had the Quicksilver. I do prefer the Fox Quicksilver, I have to say. Then we had the Aaron Taylor Johnson portrayal. We didn't get much time to spend, you know, much time with him. Need to say, I don't know. He could be making an appearance in WandaVision. I don't know. I think that could be something that you could see. You know, we could by this point either be proved right or be proved wrong. We just don't know. You mentioned there a couple of issues, and I know I know you don't really like answering this question, because then you have this idea of people have set in their head of, right, this is how much that's worth exactly. I'm going to be able to march in. Well, you can't really march in currently to your local comic book shop and say, right, this is worth such amount. I want that amount for my comic. But you mentioned a couple of issues there: X-Men 3, X-Men 4, and with Vision Avengers 57. Did you say? Yeah. So if someone was sitting in those with a pretty decent condition, not like how I keep mine, there's a bit of coffee stains over them, they've been in and out of the package and they're a wee bit bent. You know, if someone's sitting on a decent issue, and these are issues going back to the 60s, you know, what would someone be sitting on if they had, and I suppose what would they be sitting on, and what if they said, look, I haven't saved it, I haven't had it before. If I walked into the comic book guys when lockdown's over and said, Aaron, good sir, I'll have that issue of X-Men 3, please, or X-Men 4.
Well, if it was Pawn Stars, I'll tell you what I would tell them. Put it that way. No, well, let me ask you a question quickly first. Out of the two, which do you think is more valuable? Just curious.
I'm going to say, well, just because I would probably say Wanda, the X-Men 3, just because you've got Stan Lee and you've Jack Kirby.
Jim, you'd be right.
Oh, that's all right. Happy days.
So, to be fair, in terms of value, so we have sold both in the shop and we have both. Condition, I'm glad you said that. Condition is everything. Literally, it is everything when it comes to older comics. So it is hard. As you say, I hate without seeing something, ever putting a value on it, because I don't like doing that without seeing it. But I can give a rough guesstimate of what we would put on it and really what its value is. So in decent shape, in decent fine shape, the likes of Wanda's first appearance in X-Men 4, in and around maybe $2,500.
Okay.
So now that's $2,500.
And what if you've got an issue, Aaron, that it isn't kind of 100%, maybe a couple of pages maybe been ripped, someone set a coffee glass down or a coffee mug down on it, you know, what's kind of, you know, in terrible condition?
Probably about 500.
Okay. So it's even then still, like, I mean, it's something that if you have that.
I mean, if it's falling apart, you know, you're talking 300 at the very, very lowest. But, you know, even for something that's in trash condition to be worth that is phenomenal. It really is. And when I'm saying $2,500, I'm not talking, that's not me saying that's fucking the gold standard. That's me saying that's a decent shape one. You know, high end stuff, you're talking $4,000. You're talking more than that. So, whereas the Vision, Vision, weirdly, for it only being 3 or 4 years apart, it was a much more popular book at the time, Avengers, because if you think about it, X-Men had only been running for 4 issues, so it was taking people a bit of time to get into these new characters. Whereas Avengers was long running; it was on issue 57 by the time it got around to Vision. So his issue at a high end, you're talking 600-700, and that's so it's not worth massive amounts, but it still is. It's a hard book to find in good condition because the way it's drawn and the color, the way it's done on the cover, tends to be very, very. It gets very dirty and it's very hard to find in good shape. So anywhere between 200 right up to 600-700 for Vision. So Wanda far exceeds it in terms of the book, but it's not just because it's her first appearance. It's the first appearance of Quicksilver. It's the first appearance of Wanda. It's the first time you see the Brotherhood of Evil. It's the first time you see Mastermind. It's the first. There's loads of firsts in it. And that's what makes that book worth money. It's the second. Is it the second? I'm nearly sure it's the second ever appearance of Magneto. And look what he becomes. So you have to look at the relevance behind it all, and that's why I think there's that book carries so much more weight behind it as well.
I just hope there's, after listening to this or watching this, there's about 50 people just land down at the shop. I've got a copy here.
I hope so too, because those books are hard to find, especially in our wee country. There's not like there's loads of them kicking about. For the likes of Vision, it's the first appearance of Vision, who, as it was said from the outset, has never hit the A list of characters.
He's Data with a cape, right? That's the way I look at him. He's Data with a cape.
Or Spock, who's rare.
No, Spock's a bit cooler.
A wee bit, I'll give you that. But that's why that issue doesn't hold exactly the same sort of value. One of the other issues, like the wedding issue of the two of them, something like that, probably £30-40. But those are the types of issues that if you're trying to be clever and you're thinking, gonna nail this now for something that might be worth something, an issue like that for.
And again, that 30-40 quid, that's in kind of pristine, top-notch condition. Yeah. Not the way I keep them.
Definitely not the way you keep them.
No.
The one, if people want a wee tip, as a wee collectability tip, one that I would keep an eye for, and we have a couple of copies available in the shop, are the first appearance of Sword. Now, Jim mentioned earlier, Sword makes an appearance in this, the logo of Sword makes an appearance, and the first time you see Sword in comics is in a very... You think you've read this run, Jim? Do you ever read Joss Whedon's run of Astonishing X-Men?
I think I might have a collected graphic novel. I don't have them a single. I think I might have the as a collection. X-Men,
it was Joss Whedon wrote that, and it was issue 6, and the issue, like, we sell, I think it's, I don't know, 8 or 10 quid or something. Now, that was before all this became, current and hot. So that book is going to start to rise in value and ramp up in value.
Is that just at the comic book guy store, or is that just throughout the kind of general comic book stores across the globe, Aaron?
No, that's for us. We do it better than anywhere, obviously, Jim.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Do you know what the thing is? I would call it a sleeper issue. It's one that a lot of people, like in America, they call them dollar bin savings.
Yeah, but Aaron, you tell me loads of issues. You tell me that weird Japanese Batman, black and white. You get Jim's real sleeper hit. I guarantee you. See, in 5-6 years, you'll be able to put your kid through college or through school from that one.
I haven't known you for 5 or 6 years, so that still will happen, Jim. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, I only jest. And you talk about that, and I suppose kind of on a site kind of segue. I mean, kind of the condition. Like, what are you? I know you've kind of touched on there, but what are you looking for? If someone was to come in to present to you an issue of X-Men 4 after you'd kind of finished and wiped the drill away, hopefully the drill hasn't went on to the comic. What specifically, when you're talking those prices that are sitting, that's in good, pristine condition, what are you talking about?
Clean corners. So as you go around the 4 corners in the front and back, they have to be clean. You look up the where the bind would be, that there's no what they're called spine ticks. You don't want any little ticks along it, because when you open a book, you break the bind, obviously, and that creates dents and spine ticks. You don't want to see too many of them. You want the color to be popping. You want that color to go pop, bam. You want it to pop out in your face. You don't want it to be dull, and you don't want it to have, over time, if it's been pressed or it's been sitting in the attic, you don't want it to go musty. And the worrying thing is books from the 60s, what I notice when people bring them in, especially 50s and 60s books now, when people bring them in, they've been stored. Now, it's not through no fault of the person who has them, but they've been stored very badly in conditions like in a loft or, that isn't maybe waterproofed or damp coursed or whatever. And the book itself, it goes through processes of hot and cold, and this hot and cold process is not good for paper because the book will start to go wavy, and then it dries out, and that drying out leaves it wavy, and then it starts to get a very, very, like, you'll know as soon as it's old comic book smell. Mm-hmm. that's actually, believe it or not, that's very detrimental for comics because that's a fungus essentially growing on the book, and that smell is the first sign that book is starting to deteriorate. And the worrying thing is, if you put old books like that together, so if you had a really old book that's in really good shape, and you had that old shitty condition book, if you put them in the same box beside each other, even if they're bagged and boarded, you know what's going to happen, don't you? Mm-hmm. What happens with diseases?
Spread.
And what happens when the
I was trying to think of something to rhyme that with, and I was like, you already said coughs and sneezes, and I was kind of going, spreads, coughs? That doesn't make sense. But no, I get exactly what you're talking about. The smell you're describing makes me somehow think of a lot of my old issues I have that I've never even tried to sell to you, my old issues of 2000 AD. Because that have been in 2 attics, and I've got to say some of them about 5-6 years ago I just got rid of, and other ones that I just kept on to for like stuff like Judge Dredd, 2000 AD, The Pit. I kept all that kind of stuff that probably are not kept, because I'm going to be honest, it's not back then I wasn't a collector. I was someone who actually read them and loved them, and then when I refused to put away my childish things, I just put them into the loft, and all those things you kind of talked about happened to me. So that's why you can't see this, I don't think, and if you're listening to this, you can't see it, but I have my lovely boxes over there somewhere, kept in a nice kind of normal-ish room.
You want it in a cool, dry place. That's where you want to keep them.
So not in my damp shed, no. Okay. All right, okay. I'll have to speak to the boss then and see if I can move in. But anyway, we just kind of got sidetracked there because it's just the idea of like people say, "Oh, you came in and I heard there you said this is worth this amount," and even an issue you said it might be worth maybe 30-40 quid, and you kind of go, "Those are the things that you should be looking at." But anyway, like that's kind of talking about the origins. What are the artists? For you over the years with Wanda and with Vision, any artists in particular stand out for you that have worked on? I know you've mentioned, of course, the lovely Jodie Belair,
for Vision, that story, if you anybody who's listening to this, if you haven't read the Vision from 2000, I think it was 2016, it's just called The Visions. It's lovely. I can't read enough. It's Tom King and as you say, Jodie colouring it, and Jodie's colours are lovely for it. But it's them living a suburban life, and he's got a wife called Viv, and he's got a wee boy called Vin, and then his daughter's called Vivian. It's all plays on the VIs, obviously, and it's just a lovely story of him. He's a consulate to the president and stuff in it, and it gives you when I read that first time around, it was like nothing else, and it's a bit like when you watch WandaVision at the minute. It takes you down a different path, but it's the artwork and the storytelling in that comic was so new and so different, and it got massive acclaim. And it's one that when Jodie was over with us and when I spoke to her about, she had a great fondness working on it as well, because the Vision originally as a character was never supposed to be coloured. The Vision originally was supposed to be completely whited and look like a ghost, because obviously, he wasn't supposed to have feelings or a heart or whatever. But at the time when they were doing because I remember talking to Jodie about this, when they were doing the printing, I think she had said was when they were doing the printing back then, the printing press isn't like today. It couldn't handle the technology that we have today. So if it had a printed like an off-color white or a sort of a pale white, it would have just looked uncolored completely, and it wouldn't have looked good at all in the issue. So they ended up having to paint the Vision. They had to do the Vision red, which we all know him for today. So whenever she came to color, because that's her, that's predominantly what she does. She had these lovely rich red and fucking pink tones in it. Just a gorgeous looking book. Like a lot of the books that people always go on about, they always talk about the writer and forget how good the artwork is in some of these stories. And the art in that book tells sometimes more of a story than the actual writing does. So if you're looking for it's only 12 issues, so it's not a long read, but it gives you an idea and a flavour for what WandaVision is like. So it is similar in its tone to what it's doing. So it's one that I would massively recommend as a read for Vision. There are obviously stories with Vision and Scarlet Witch together. There's loads of good stories with them together. In the 80s, there was a lot of it was just called Vision and Scarlet Witch, where it was all about them and having kids and stuff, which was quite nice. They ended up having two wee boys, and all those stories are all happy-go-lucky stories. There was weird ones with love triangles with Hawkeye and stuff in them. But the best story when it comes to Wanda and the Vision is House of M, hands down.
Well, you've mentioned this a few times. I know the one thing I did want to ask you just before we got into House M, is there any notable artists for you working on Wanda? Because I've seen kind of, from my limited experience, where there's some times where she's portrayed, and it's kind of the thing, it's a bit like Catwoman with Batwoman. some peeps go out and draw her, and it's kind of a teenage boy's wet dream. I've seen that a couple of times with Scarlet Witch. There's no getting away from that. We're two lads here. So there's no female perspective on this podcast. There is times, but I mean, I've talked about this in the past. I think on a previous podcast about Wonder Woman, actually was talking, there's a difference between sexualized and being sexy.
Yes.
I mean, we're not going to go down too much that because I said it's two lads talking. I'd be like, yeah, I really like that issue. That's good. But I mean, it is a thing I am kind of more conscious about now as I near 40, as I probably would never have been in my teenage years. I'd have probably picked up something just for that. But just off the top of your head, any notable artists that have worked for you, or any that you think of the definitive Wanda?
Well, when it comes to Wanda, you said people like J. Scott Campbell, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with these names, but J. Scott Campbell and Shannon Mayer and people like that, they draw her in a very, very revealing way that, you know, as you say, could be construed as over sexualizing the character. But I think the person who nailed Wanda the most.
Be careful what you say. Be very careful how you word that.
It's probably
your comic will definitely not be in pristine condition if you're nailing Wanda.
I'm not buying comics, but they're stuck together.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I'm just. What can I say? I'm just going it for laughs.
We'll say the person who probably drew Wanda the best. Is that a better way to put it?
Yeah, that's a better way.
In my eyes, because everybody's tastes are different, art's so subjective, is probably King Kirby. I don't think there's ever an artist who draws anyone better. But for the House of M stuff and around that era, there was an artist called Lionel Yu, and he draws her very, very much like what you'd imagine seeing the Wasp or somebody like that drawn. And the costume that was created around that time wasn't as like that 1960s costume's it's a bit dodgy in hindsight, you know. It's a bit fucking rock and roll, you know.
It's basically it's a type of costume I don't think I'm going to be able to put up on my wall.
Yeah, shoulder pads and fucking, you know, it's a weird looking costume, but the sort of current incarnation of it with people like there's loads of really like Rosenberg storyline with X-Men and stuff where she started to appear. They had like Lionel Hughes drawn that, and unbelievable some of the stuff that he was drawn with it. So I would say if you're looking for a good version or a very, very true to style version, you can't go far wrong with King Kirby.
I don't even know if it did. Did I ask you, I mean, is anything similarish kind of with Vision? Definitive kind of portrayals? I know you mentioned John Buscema earlier on. Anybody else you kind of think of off the top of your head?
Well, Buscema had created the look of the character, so anybody that drew after, probably actually around the time when Vision was in the run with Kitty Pryde and stuff, you're talking in around the 80s, the Vision changed. They actually put him in the West Coast Avengers, and they made him colorless again after talking about the color. And at the time, I'm trying to remember who was drawing them at the time. I can't remember offhand, but they changed the look of the Vision, and it didn't really work so well. So they went back to that traditional style that Buscema came up with. And I've seen other artists like Ramita and stuff's drawn them, and there's been loads of really old style artists who the Vision's a character that works very well for an old comic book look. You know, when you put them into the new sort of format, when you see people today drawing all the characters in that in Huck Lee's type style or in Ram Brown's style, you know, that digital looking portraiture stuff works for a lot of characters, but I don't think it necessarily works for people like Vision, Silver Surfer, for those type of characters who are more suited to traditional comic book style. So as I say, they've all drawn them wonderfully, but my style would be more for those ones, would be, as I say, the likes of John or Sal Buscema.
Okay, so that then brings us almost full circle, and we've talked, well, you've mentioned House of M a lot. 8 issues, I think, 2005. What is it about it that you would say, seek this out? I'm sure you have issues that you can pick up at the comic book guys. You know, what is it about this particular run? What is it about that draws you so much? In particular, I suppose the parallels, now with WandaVision.
You see, I mean, before WandaVision, I mean, I've only watched 2 episodes, so, but House of M is one of those, it's what I would call like a sort of a stalwart in terms of when people come in to me and ask for recommendations. Every single year, without fail, and you are as guilty as I am with this, Jim, you'll read the big arc, the big storyline that each publisher puts out. And every single year, there's, you know, DC have done it over the years, Convergence, they've done, obviously Metal, they've done all those things.
Trinity War.
Exactly. So Marvel, for a long time, went through a phase of doing big arcs, but their biggest one was Civil War, which everybody obviously knows and loves. But they did, as you quite rightly said, one called House of M. It was around the same time as Secret Invasion, and Secret Invasion was one that I was directing people towards because I thought that was the next phase of where Marvel were going with the Kree and Skrulls, and they still are by the looks of things with the Eternals and all that. But under the radar, it's one that I've read a million times over, House of M, but it's just a story that I've loved. And I could not believe that in WandaVision, the premise, it's exactly like it. So Wanda creates, and just to give you a bit of, I'll not spoil the story too much, but just to give you a background, House of M, her 2 kids get killed earlier in another arc, and so she wants to try to make the world right again because the Avengers have plotted, and I think it's the Avengers and X-Men team up to kill her, and Quicksilver says, listen, we need to set this right. You need to do something here. So she alters the whole reality and makes everything seem fine and dandy in the garden. She's in control of the world pretty much, and she alters it. She alters her cognitive, and her mindset is that she believes what she's experiencing. A bit like, but she knows there's something wrong there, which is very like what's going on in WandaVision at the minute. So it's a story that if you wanted to try to find out, now it might be completely wrong, but if you wanted to find out maybe the route that WandaVision can go, if you read House of M, because I know how House of M leads and where it goes, if they do that in this, which I could see them potentially doing, there's massive repercussions for, as I said earlier, what the multiverse stuff could go to. And that's why I think that this is the setup piece for it. I mean, the other thing why I would recommend strongly to read House of M, when we talked about those nods earlier, did you notice that again, it's a very, very fucking, you have to be a proper Uber nerd to notice it. But
so I'm probably not. I probably won't.
When she's pouring the wine in it, it says in French, "Mais en Denmark." I can't speak French. I can try.
I gathered that there from that very authentic experience. Yeah.
Well, that's called Del Boy French.
It sounded a bit. I was going to say more allo French.
But anyway, do you know what that means in French?
You're going to tell me.
House of M.
Okay.
So why would it be thrown?
But do you also think like Marvel, particularly on something like this, and when you're moving from short form storytelling to long form storytelling, do you think there's a lot of those knowingly are kind of being put in, those nods and those kind of Easter eggs potentially to throw you off the scent?
I thought that originally. I did. I genuinely, I sort of thought, they're trying to be too clever because I know people will read into this, and then if they read into it, they'll think they've figured it out, and then they'll be proven wrong because we'll take them down a different route. And that could exactly be what happens.
So here's a question. And I know I didn't want to talk too much about WandaVision. And I know, as I say, we're only 2 episodes in, and by the time this is out, things we are talking about here might be debunked, might have been proved to be right or wrong.
Yeah.
But do you want, sitting here now, having read House of M, do you want it to play out that way?
Yes.
Knowing that it was going to, what that could do to the future of the MCU for the rest of Phase 4 into Phase 5 and beyond? Or do you want Kevin Feige and co to say, right, well, that's the route you think we're going to go down, but this is what we're actually going to do? Sitting now as a fan,
yes,
what would you rather? Would you rather kind of say, well, I read House of M, I know that's what you're going to do, so that's going to lead to this, that's going to lead to that? Or if WandaVision finishes and throws a complete curveball and it's all a dream in Steve Rogers' head and Iron Man is actually Steve Rogers' butler, I don't know. Or it's kind of like the Red Dwarf.
Moment.
Yeah, it's like the Red Dwarf with it. Is it the Squid of Sadness? I can never remember that episode where it's all actually a video game, right? All that kind of idea. That much of a curveball. It's not going to be. We know it's not going to be. But you know what I mean? In the sense of you sitting here kind of think, you're not saying it because you don't want to spoil stuff for anyone who might want to come in and buy House of M, anyone who's going to watch
not to beat around the bush in terms of what happens in House of M. Some people, again, it's not a spoiler, so I'll try to say it in such a way it's not a spoiler. The story explains how some people stay dead. And obviously WandaVision is set after a lot of people we've seen getting bumped off and not knowing how that ends up. If they go down the route of House of M, that will be explained. And that's why I like the sounds of it, because you'll get to find out some clarification on what happened.
Okay.
So it's not more, my reason for wanting it to happen isn't necessarily because I want to see the multiverses coming together and all that stuff. I like to see how they tie up what's went before, and I think that could be the storyline to do it.
Okay. I think that's a nice point to leave this pod on. I'm intrigued. As I say, I'm tempted. If things were different, Aaron, I'd probably be down tomorrow morning going, Aaron, give us an old issue of there. Give me a bit of House of M. Stick it on a loyalty card, because comic book guys have a loyalty card now. And build all those points up towards Christmas 2021. But sadly, we're in lockdown. We can't. But people can, of course, use the website and order stuff online.
www.comicbookguys.co.uk. We loaded it on with loads of graphics today, so you'll have a load of read to go through.
I feel compelled to say the bit that Aaron always hates. House of M is available at other comic book retailers. But why go anywhere else when you can sit and talk to Aaron about all this and tell him, here, lad, listen in that podcast. See all your theories, load of shit. See that skull? It's not a skull. It's actually Red. It's actually Red Hood's head. That's what it is. Because do you know what? And again, this is because I'm the complete novice in this. Do you know who I really want to see coming back in Phase 4? And I want Hydra to be back. I think Hydra have kind of went away, but we all know with all that kind of thing, it's a bit like the Sinn Féin IRA thing. We haven't gone away,
Haven't gone away,
I want that, and I was kind of hoping something might be there because we have, as we mentioned, the Strucker watch. You're kind of going, oh, could this be? I don't know. I could be way off. Aaron's not going to tell me.
You're not way off, Jim. I think you're right on track.
Happy days. Well, there you go. If I've inadvertently spoiled anything, I apologize. And I apologize even more, listeners and viewers, if I've spoiled the whole thing by actually revealing that the whole thing within the MCU, everything so far has actually been a dream, or it's all been a video game that Steve and Tony have been playing. And Steve's actually from Wolves. He's from Wolverhampton. And I don't know where Tony's from. Tony's from Birmingham. Both those voices, they sound exactly the same. I apologize, Kevin Feige. You told me that in the strictest of confidence. But anyway, that's enough of that. It's a lovely kind of point to end. So, House of M, you've definitely got me sold. A couple other issues there. I can't think of anything, Aaron, else that we need to talk about other than comics are available at your shop. And just because there's a lockdown doesn't mean you can't not buy them.
Comics are for everyone, and comics are always there. So, if you ever need anything, just drop us a message and we'll get you sorted.
Okay. And on that note, thank you very much, Mr. Flanagan.
Thank you, Jim.
So that's a wrap on this week's episode. Thank you for listening. Thanks again to Aaron for taking the time to take part in the recording. It's always a lot of fun with Aaron. I enjoy geeking out with him. What can I say? I'm a big old geek at heart, even if I'm a little bit more DC than Marvel, but let's not go down there. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything. We'll have Aaron on again in March to talk about Falcon and the Winter Soldier when that hits Disney+. And Aaron will be back to give you the 101 on everything you need to know about those characters. You've got that to look forward to. And next week, I think we're going to be continuing with Disney Plus title, as I think we are being hijacked by the Banterflix Geek Squad with Jess and Warren Blair, and they're going to be talking about The Mandalorian, specifically Season 2 in spoilerific detail, so you've that to look forward to. And there's a few more podcasts as well in February. We have Crime Scene to Screen coming up. We have Movie Screen to Cosplay Scene. And we have We Need to Talk About Disney. And a few other pods that are hosted by yours truly in his usual rambly way. But anyway, that's enough of that. You've that to look forward to. If this is your first time checking out the pod, you can find our complete back catalogue on the website. Just simply search for Banterflix in any search engine, and it should bring you to the website where you'll find not only the back catalogue of this podcast, but also the back catalogue of our TV show on NVTV. You'll also find written reviews and features, and you'll also find some articles on recent movie news and also some movie trailers. I know we recently put up the Godzilla vs. King Kong trailer, and I'm really excited about that. Yes, it's loud and looks silly, but hey, in the year that it has been, I think I'm ready for something loud and silly on the biggest screen possible. That's all I can say. But anyway, that's enough of that. I've been your host, Jim McLean, the editor-in-chief of the Banterflix Movie Review website, and we'll be back next week with another pod. But for now, until then, goodbye.
This has been We Need to Talk About Movies. Thanks for listening. For more information, visit banterflix.com. See you next time.